Hi and welcome. In this lecture, you are going to be introduced to the process of writing a research proposal. But before delving into details about this, you have to know what is a research proposal. So, a research proposal is the work plan, outline, statement of intent, or a draft plan describing what, why, how, where, and when the research will be done. A very well planned and adequate research proposal is essentially as a road map showing where the journey begins, the destination to be reached, and the method of getting there. So, in short, it is a statement of intent. It is a plan which is academically prepared to complete the research, and it is meant to be presented and to audience, peers, supervisors, and examiners. So it should be very well written to convince others of your future plan about the research you want to conduct. Part of the main features of a good research proposal that it should be between 4 to 5 pages maximum depending on the field of your study. And usually when you write you have to have a look at research a proposal samples, and you can find the samples in the first chapters of past theses. The research proposal should develop further to be the first chapter of your future thesis. Thus, before writing a research proposal, as I mentioned earlier, it is important to check sample theses. So you have to visit libraries at your institutions, check the first chapters, how they are written, and also you can check other formats online, visiting online libraries, for example, British Ethos Library, which provides sample theses from prestigious universities in the UK. And also you have to choose your topic and specify your field of interest. You have to do some extensive reading about the current state of the field that you want to conduct a research on. Narrow your focus to a specific niche and identify the problem that you will address. And you have to be very specific. You have to focus on a specific field of study. When you write your research proposal, there are specific grammatical features you have to put in your mind when you write your sections of your research proposal. So you have to pay attention to the tense. There are, in general, three broad sections in a research proposal: the introduction, literature review, and the methodology section. In the introduction, it is usually written in the present tense, and the literature review is written in the past tense, narrating whatever research had been done in this particular field of study. And the methodology section is written in the future tense because it is a plan, it is intended a plan that is not accomplished yet. So you have to use the future tense. The outline of the researcher proposal, it should contain these elements. For example, the title, introduction, background of the study, definitions of key terms, literature review, research questions. Sometimes you include hypotheses, it depends on the field of your study, significance of the study, data, methods, and you list the references. Again, it is important to mention that some elements can be skipped, other elements can be added. For example, the framed or time frame or schedule for the proposed study. Sometimes it is required from the researcher to mention the time frame. Thus, it depends on the field of the study. The first element in the research proposal is the title. The title should be stated briefly and precisely, and you have to indicate the focus of the research. You have to give clues to the readers. What is the study about? Important keywords are mentioned, and the title should be precise, simple, and describe your future thesis. It should be brief, catchy, and self-explanatory, and identify the main issues of the research. The title shouldn't be long. It should approximate between 10 to 12 words. So the title of a research should give the idea for the researchers or the supervisors what you intend to do. Remember, it should be in a statement form, not in a question form, and every word in the title should be covered in the research. For example, here an example of a title, Analysis of EFLD Teachers Demotivation and Awareness in Spain. So you have certain keywords indicating what is the nature of your study. Things to remember about your title, it is not fixed, it can be adjusted in the duration or the process of writing your research, but these features you should take into consideration while writing the title of your proposed research. The introduction in the proposal research should be written in the present tense and should convince readers of the relevance of the study. It should identify a problem in the real world and narrows down the scope of the research into specific research questions. Sometimes you have one question, other times you have more than a question that the study attempts to answer. It should include details about the problem that is addressed and why it is important to be addressed. Next element, definitions of key terms. As a researcher, you need to provide the meaning of key terms in your study, and you do not assume that readers are familiar with your topic. So write the proposal as if unfamiliar for but knowledgeable person is reading it. These terms may be integrated sometimes in the introduction or clarified in the literature review section. However, some research proposals include a glossary of key terms and abbreviations in the appendix section. Definitions should be clear, concise, and you can include quotes from scholars, well-known scholars, to support your definitions. Definitions usually should be descriptive, contain brief illustrated examples. To give an example of definitions of key terms, for example, in this title, you have to define, for example, the key terms demotivation, motivation, awareness. These are the key terms that you need to present them clearly in a descriptive manner in your section of definitions of key terms. Section, which is an important part in your research proposal, the research questions. In this section, the proposal, you have to state the question or questions that research will address. They need to be in the form of questions, not in a statement, and they need to be specific and answerable through methods that you have proposed in your proposal. You have to avoid yes/no questions. Usually, writing research questions, it is a matter of how, what, and why, and should relate directly to the overall topic that you have discussed and incorporate in any concept of variables that you have discussed earlier in the proposal. Good research a question should be um, pinpoint exactly what do you want to find out in your work, and it should guide you through your through the process of your study. Certain elements are needed to be included in in composing your research question. You should focus on a single problem or issue, researchable using primary or secondary sources, and feasible to answer within the time frame and practical constraint. And the research question should be specific enough to answer thoroughly, complex enough to develop the answer over the space of a paper or a thesis and relevant to your field of your study. It should be complex enough, not a simple. And yes, that's why you should avoid yes/no questions because you need time to answer this question during the process of writing your research. Examples of research questions here we have a couple of examples. Number one, have how have school intervention programs affected the literacy levels of Iraqis? Grade 6 students in public schools. The other one, in what ways have parental education levels affected the literacy levels of grade 6 students in public schools? Another important section in your research proposal, the literature review. To avoid, we need to write a literature review so we avoid reinventing the wheel. You don't want to repeat what have been written by others. So you have to give a credit to the previous researchers, demonstrate the knowledge of the researcher problem. You have to be very specific in this section and mention only the studies that are related to the specific field of your study. And you have to demonstrate your understanding of the theoretical and the research issues related to your research question. You need to critically evaluate the relevant literature and to integrate and synthesize the existing literature. You need sometimes to provide a new theoretical insights, develop a new model as the conceptual framework for your research. Your voice, it is important that your voice should be heard while listing or mentioning the literature review. You need sometimes to agree and disagree and with the scope of the research and feel free to criticize but be professional using a necessary academic language. An important element in the literature review section, which is criticality. It is not, you should not only list what have been written by others, but you cannot simply list the literature you find, and you have to evaluate, compare, contrast, draw conclusions from it. So view the literature as a boxing ring, not as a display cabinet, listing only whatever uh, is accomplished from previous scholars. Criticality in writing literature review is a challenging task. It requires a skill in writing. So, some key tips can be helpful in writing your literature review. You have to make connections between the sources, compare and contrast sources, and you have adopt, accept points made by the sources with reasons. You can also reject the points made by the sources. You show, for example, limitations in the methodology, whether these are out of date, limited scope, are there any geographical delimitations, etc. Indicate the position you are taking in your work, the theories and the concepts presented in the sources, and show how limitations in the existing literature can create a research gap for you. This is important. While reviewing the literature, you have to identify the research gap and you have to organize whatever ideas are presented in order to show your voice in writing the literature review section. Significance of the study. Why is your study worth doing? It is important in this section to mention or to convince others of the significance of your study. So you have to justify the study on the basis of knowledge gaps, doing the research in a different context, for example, than those explored previously. The methodology can be different or the theoretical contribution. So this is your chance to pitch your research idea and state its potential contribution. Don't forget also to mention your data, whether you are dealing with literary, non-literary text. Sometimes you have to identify whether you have qualitative data using interviews, observations, or quantitative data using questionnaires, surveys, or using both of types of data. So, in research data, any information that has been collected, observed, generated, or created to validate the original research findings. So, sometimes the data can be digital or include a non digital formats such as laboratory notes. The next section is the methodology section. in which you have to detail the participants, the instruments, the research design, the setting, the procedure, and and you have to show the readers the work will be done in a clear methodological manner, the data will be collected without bias, and show the ethical codes that are followed in data collection and the treatment of the sample. Sometimes you need to mention the interpreter validity. There is a, you need to follow the researcher collect when the researcher collects the data personally. And the methodology section should be written in the future tense because it is a plan, not or it is a draft. It should be a future plan for doing the research. While writing your research proposal, there are certain cohesive ties that connect your ideas together in writing, making your idea, in academic writing, making your ideas, the transition between ideas is smooth. And these are linguistic devices that link words, phrases, and clauses into fluent sentences and paragraphs. And these are very important in a research proposal. They help you to sign a post and order your material. They are especially useful in the methodology section to ensure that your process is clearly and logically set out. Example here for using cohesive ties, which are written in bold in this paragraph. If you read this paragraph carefully, you can find words like foremost, not only, but also, in order to, subsequently. You need to use these cohesive ties in order to connect your ideas and show that you have a skill in writing, especially in academic writing. This is the end of the lecture. Thanks for watching.